Hey, what's going on, guys? Happy Friday. I'm here with Robert Freeborn, and he is a member at the gym. He is somebody who I've known for a couple of years now, just through the gym, and then he's become a friend of ours. Obviously, right now from Facebook, he is a social distance friend, which is cool. But Robert, I would like you to tell them what you are because I already forgot, and you just told me a minute ago. So, who are you? What are you doing? Why are we talking about the coronavirus today?
Okay. So I am in my fifth year of graduate school at Michigan State University. So I was expecting to receive my PhD in June of this year. Now,
Yeah.
with the coronavirus, unsure about that timeline. But my degree, I'm getting a double major for my PhD. The first is pharmacology and toxicology, and then the second is environmental toxicology. So what we're exposed to can mess us up. And then my research in particular focuses on the immune response to influenza, so another respiratory virus with
Yeah.
potential for pandemics. So very relevant to right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I've seen you post a few things on Facebook, and then just kind of like picking your brain a couple times. I know Taylor sent you a couple. My wife has sent you a couple different messages. I'm just asking you like random, like she has like random thoughts, and she'll be like, "I gotta ask somebody about this," and she does that all the time. And so I know she sent you at least one thing that I know of, and then I just like feel like there's so much nonsense out there about it. Not that I'm saying people are like purposely misinforming, which I feel like might happen, but I feel like people just see, the one that is most recent, and maybe it is accurate. You can tell me. Is like the ibuprofen, Tylenol, Advil, whatever that whole thing was.
Yeah.
Like if you take this, it's going to make it worse. If you don't take it, it's going to make it better. And like I have probably received that message in my Facebook instant message thing 10 to 15 times.
Yep.
And so like, that's what I mean. There's everything like, you record one thing and it's the gospel all of a sudden and spread all over the world. And then, but like, it might not even be true. And so I just
Right.
kind of wanted to talk through some of that stuff with you. But before we go there, I just want to talk about your health and fitness journey, because I know over the last couple of years, that's been something you have intentionally made strides towards.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk about kind of how, and we can kind of transition this into the coronavirus. Like, how did you get to the point that you were like, I need to do something? And then, what did it do for you and your schooling, your career, that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
All right. So yeah, my journey at redemption and getting into it. When I was growing up, from the time I was 3, I was playing sports. So I started t-ball and whatnot, and then stuck with baseball up until high school. Played soccer from the time I was 5, and actually still managed to be playing in graduate school until I had an injury that tore 4 ligaments in my knee. Um,
Oh, that does
yeah,
not sound fun.
it wasn't. It really wasn't. That was a fun journey, like going
Yeah.
through the health center and stuff. They're like, "Oh no, you're able to stand on it. Nothing's torn." Until 6 weeks later, I still couldn't walk right, and they're like, "Let's get an MRI," and found out everything was torn.
You're like, hey, thanks. Could have done this a few weeks ago.
Yeah, no, it was very weird. And actually, like, the doctor that saw me at the time, she's like, "You're fine. Go get a knee brace from physical therapy downstairs." And I
Oh,
go down to
really?
physical therapy, and they're like, "You can hardly move." Like, they said a knee brace. No, we're giving you crutches, and we're starting you in physical therapy 3 times a week. And if you
Wow.
don't improve, surgery. And yeah, that was weird. But that really stopped my athleticism. Um, and I like food, so that was a problem not having
Yeah,
my
you like
main.
burritos
Oh my
specifically.
god, oh, I love burritos. Yeah. But so you know I slowed down the exercising, didn't slow down
Yeah.
the eating. And athletes, you get pretty big stomachs if you're not careful, right? You put a
Yeah.
lot of volume in there. And so I was always hungry and eating the wrong things, especially, when I was recovering from my knee injury. I'm not getting up to cook in the kitchen, not a chance.
Right.
So, put on a lot of weight, ended up getting up to about 230 pounds, which I'm 5'9", and I wasn't particularly muscular. I was fairly lean before,
Yeah.
but not ripped or anything, right? So 230, that was a lot of fat. And eventually, being a scientist, you have to face the facts. And all of the data out there suggests that obesity is a comorbidity for pretty much any disease you can think of. And
Yeah.
then, my family has a lot of cardiac history and hypertension and high blood pressure and things like that. I'm like, I got to face this. Like, I'm in my 20s. If I don't take care of it now, chances are it's game over.
Yeah.
A lot of people have a hard time overcoming things like that later in life. So I really wanted to get ahead of it while I still have the metabolism that can support it and whatnot.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
joined Redemption almost 2 years ago now. It would be 2 years in June. And, I've been loving it. Very great supportive environment, especially right now with the pandemic, having
Yeah.
coaches FaceTime and make sure you're still getting in your workout and actually like watching an hour-long workout in my basement, right?
She's just there like, are you moving?
Oh, she's laughing at me the whole time. She's like, it's just 5 burpees. Come on. And I'm like, 5 burpees is a lot.
You're like, that's like only one bite of a burrito. It
Yeah.
doesn't even make sense. Like, it's not even worth it.
Yep.
That's funny, man. So when you started with us, you were right around 230, right? If I
Yeah.
remember correctly.
Yep.
I know you just said that, but I couldn't remember if there was something prior.
Yeah.
So you go from 230 to what?
So the lowest I got with you guys was 179. And
Yep.
then that was last February,
Mhm.
March, somewhere around there. And then I got hit with this crazy flu. I was out. I didn't go to work for 3 weeks. It was just miserable. Wasn't working out. I was managing to still cook healthy food, making sure I was getting my vegetables and protein and whatnot. Fun fact, you don't want to calorically restrict yourself if you have an infection. It's actually been shown to make you worse off. So even if you're trying to lose weight, if you get an infection, please, for the love of God, eat enough food.
This is
It's
from a scientist, not me, guys.
Yes, it's more important to survive the infection than lose weight. You can lose weight afterwards.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, so I got down to 179 and that was freaking awesome. I was loving that. Then this summer I went out to California for an internship at a really big biotech company, and in the land of burritos, what am I going to do but eat burritos, right? I mean,
Right. That just makes sense. And
yeah.
it's like scientifically proven that burritos make you happier. I think
Oh yeah.
that's something, I'm sure
The,
it's out there.
the company I was working at had 2 taquerias on campus that, I mean, their burritos on campus were fantastic. So I would walk over, grab a burrito, and walk over and eat lunch at the beach, and then go back to work, right? It was so
Yeah.
great. But now I'm back up to about 210, and I'm like, okay, this is bad. I got to fix this still.
Yeah.
So,
Like, I gotta go work out again.
yep.
But dude, it ebbs and flows for everybody.
Oh, for sure.
Even trainers, like even myself, dude. Like I'm back after I lost all that weight, a little over a year ago. Also,
Yep.
I probably put another not 20, probably 15 back on or so. And then now I'm on my way back down. Actually,
Yep.
this like lockdown thing has surprisingly made it easier for me to lose weight, which makes no sense to me, but whatever. I'm
Yep.
gonna roll with it. So yeah. So now, like, speaking of the lockdown and the coronavirus and stuff like that, I personally was initially under the I'm gonna say impression, it might not be the right word, but for me, I was thinking like, hey, this might not be as big of a deal as like what some people are saying that it is. But let's err on the side of caution. And that was my like stance when we first started like making the adjustments at the gym. So like you probably got the email like, hey, we're dropping class sizes down to 8.
Yep.
Wash your hands, that kind of stuff. And so when we did that, I was still kind of like, okay, this like we're probably going to be fine, but like, let's just do this. And so that's kind of where I was. So would you mind, like, from your perspective, could you explain to somebody like me, why was that the initial perspective of so many people? Like, why do you think, I guess you don't know why, but why do you think that would be the perspective?
A lot of it goes into communication. This virus was first identified in China early December. And I feel like on this side of the world, we didn't really start hearing about it until mid to late January. And even then this is limited to China, right? And when we look back at other things, so like SARS, there was the same thing. It started over there. And end of the day, SARS only infected about 8,000 people worldwide. So in our lifetimes, we're not used to seeing this global pandemic. We think, okay, yeah, this is popping up. We have modern medicine. We're going to be able to stop this. It's not an issue. We're not used to getting hit by these viruses. And a lot of it came down to communication. Initially, it was, okay, this is a thing. We don't need to worry about it. And actually, even from like, our president, love him or hate him. And initially, what he was saying was, we very much have this under control. And when this pandemic hit America, first identified in Seattle, at the end of January, we had 5 cases on record, right?
Yeah.
And we were told, yeah, the CDC is working really well. We have this under control. But then you get to the end of February, we're up to 60 cases now, and we're in the beginning of April, over, what was it, like
Yeah, I'm not
224,000
even. I
cases in
should have looked.
America.
We should have looked before we started, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I
a
mean, we
lot.
have more cases now than Italy and Spain combined,
Yeah,
confirmed
that's crazy.
cases. Yeah, and so a lot of it was, we didn't know what to expect. What we were told was, initially, this isn't a big deal. In fact, those were words on record
Yeah,
by top officials. And it really just came out of nowhere. And I think, one of the things too is when this started, we didn't have good data on how this was spreading. Now they're saying between 1/3 to 50% of the cases are spread by people before they even know they're infected. And
wow.
so, I mean, so you right now could be like, I'm healthy, I'm going to go to the grocery store. And,
Right.
how many people are at the grocery store? You might actually have the virus and not know it. You might not start showing symptoms for up to 2 weeks. And so,
Yeah, that's what's
even though,
crazy.
yeah,
That's what's crazy to
absolutely.
me. Is like 2 weeks you could be carrying this thing and have no idea.
Yeah, absolutely. It's terrifying. And
Yeah. Well, and so I guess in your, like, from your perspective, from your point of view, like what do you think is the reason that, like, this is spreading so fast? Is it just simply for that reason, or is it because, like, the social distancing thing isn't being taken seriously? Like what about it is making it spread and making it so difficult to control?
so there's definitely the pre-symptomatic spreaders. That's a huge issue, right?
Yeah.
If you look at modeling, so there are a bunch of not experiments, but studies out there that do modeling with different ways. And I mean, you get rid of the pre-symptomatic spreading. They said just from the pre-symptomatic spreaders, if you get rid of symptomatic people and just look at who isn't showing symptoms and spreading the virus, that alone is enough, just about enough to start an epidemic on its own. Um,
Wow.
so that contributes drastically to this. But yeah, you do have people not taking the social distancing. Um, they're not seeing this for what it is. They're like, yeah, this is whatever, right?
Let's
Or,
call them how they are. They're assholes. Like,
your words, not mine.
dude, okay, so I have, like, this part-time job I've talked about on the podcast a few
Uh-huh.
times, where I deliver GoPuff snacks,
Right.
basically Grubhub for QDs and 7-Elevens, more or less.
Yep.
And dude, last night I was working. I delivered to a house party with probably 30 or 40 people inside of it on campus. And I've never been so angry at somebody I've never met in my life.
Yeah.
And so I will say it. Person I delivered to last night at an undisclosed location, you're an asshole.
Yeah.
So
Oh
anyway, back to
God.
what you were saying. Sorry, didn't mean to jump in there.
Oh,
But
no worries, no worries. Well, yeah. So that's one of the issues, right? People are just like, oh, I'm healthy. I can go out and do these things.
right.
You know, um, part of it too is a lot of people are like, oh, it's only spread if an infected person coughs, right, or sneezes, and it's starting to turn out that might not be the case. They're thinking just breathing could be enough to spread this disease. There are several reports coming out now in the scientific literature that suggest this could be the case.
Yeah.
So that is a policy that so far the WHO isn't supporting. So take it for what it's worth. It's in the scientific literature. Whether or not it becomes officially recognized is
Yeah.
still up for debate.
So it's
But
basically, essentially, what you're saying is, like, the science shows that it's very possible that that's what's happening, but the World Health Organization has not, like basically put out an official statement saying that's what's happening.
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So they essentially have to look at the reports and weigh the evidence. They're probably just waiting for more reports that are just a little bit stronger before they're willing to say it, because that alone changes how we're supposed to respond to it, right?
Yeah.
That's actually I don't know if you saw the national or the CDC started saying everyone should be wearing masks if you go to places where social distancing isn't easy to do. So like grocery stores with
Yeah.
small aisles, they're recommending everyone wear masks. That's
Right.
because of these new reports coming out suggesting that just by breathing, this could be spreading.
Yeah, and we're recording this on April 4th, and this is gonna
Yes.
be out on the 10th, I think, whatever that Friday is. So like the next Friday. So
Yep.
the day you're listening to this might not even be relevant anymore, but like that's currently, as of right now, that's what I saw that this morning as well, um, on Facebook, and I'm like, for the beginning of this thing, like I was like listening to every podcast, every press conference from all the governors. I'm like, give me all the information. Like, I need to prepare my house to like pack up and like go hide in the woods. And, I mean, you know what I mean though. Like
Yeah.
everybody, I feel like everybody has those moments of panic and those
Hmm.
moments of severe anxiety where like
Yeah.
you might almost feel stuck and crippled. And then there's also like you could also be on the flip side of that where you're like, I don't even care about it. And um, so I guess like for those types for the people that are like
Hmm.
super stressed about this right now,
Yeah.
what can they do to protect themselves and to not spread it if they have it themselves? Because it's, let's face the facts, like a lot of people are carrying it that don't know, like you
Right.
literally just said that. So what can they do to like kind of ease their anxiety a little bit, like when they have to go to the store or when they have to go out and about?
So yeah, that's the hardest thing, right? Okay. Hand hygiene, obviously very important. Wash your hands. For the love of God, wash your hands properly. There are tons of videos out there and infographics and whatnot showing you how to do it.
There's
Go to
probably
this.
some funny ones, I bet, too.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. These things are everywhere now. So, if you don't know how to wash your hands, go to the CDC, go to the WHO. They've got info on that. Do that, right? Because the first thing is you're touching stuff,
Right.
and if you're at home, you're in your safe space. You're not thinking about touching your face, or who knows what surfaces in your house are already contaminated that you're touching, thinking they're totally safe. Wash your hands before you leave the house, first and foremost. I personally carry travel size hand sanitizers in my car. That's
Yeah.
something that I've always done anyway. Um, Using them more now than I used to.
Like one bottle a week.
Yeah. uh,
Can can I ask you a question real quick? So
yeah.
why you said wash your hands before you leave your house. I don't disagree with you, but why? Because if
Because,
my house is where it's safe and I'm leaving and
yep.
I feel like everything's clean inside, why should I wash my hands before I go out?
Just because it's safe to you doesn't mean it's safe. Uh,
Okay.
if you're an asymptomatic carrier, you might be immune to the virus and it might be everywhere in your house, right? So you're just over here touching all these things, picking up all this virus on your hands. Even if you're not going to show symptoms, you might have it. And if you wash your hands, that's at least getting rid of whatever you were touching in your house. You're
Okay.
already a little bit safer as far as protecting
For
other
everybody
people.
else. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's, for me, I think that's one of the biggest things. And that's what's been pushed since the beginning by all of, any official you look at, wash your
Yeah.
hands. Um,
Wash your hands for 20 seconds with warm water. Like I
yeah.
can almost recite what they say.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so good hand hygiene, and good hand hygiene goes beyond just washing your hands as well. So when you're out and about, uh, try to pay attention to what you're touching. So, if you go to the store, you do all your stuff, you get in your car. So you open up your car door, you get in your car, hand sanitize. You have to realize now the outside of your car door is contaminated. So when you get home, you get out, you close your door. If you're touching the handle, you're touching a contaminated surface. Wash your hands again, which always wash your hands when you get home. I
Yeah.
think that goes without saying as well.
Yeah.
But be mindful if you're in the store and you go to grab your car keys without washing your hands first. Your car keys are now contaminated. So you put them in your pocket, you go home, and then you take your car keys out to put them in whatever, if you hang
Yeah.
them on the wall,
Right.
put them on the counter
Throw
or
them in a
whatever.
bucket, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. You're now taking your contaminated car keys and spreading them in your house, now contaminating more surfaces as well. So it's really important to pay attention to this. Just the other day, I had to drive to Meyer, didn't go in, but Jennifer needed to go to the pharmacy, pick something up, not COVID related. um, but I was sitting there waiting in the car. I took the dogs because they love going outside.
Yeah.
And we were sitting there waiting, and I saw a lady come out wearing gloves and a mask. I'm like, okay, you're protecting yourself. That's fine. But here's the thing. She's pushing her shopping cart. She has all her groceries, puts her groceries in the car with her gloved hands, then pulls out her car keys with her gloved hands, gets in the car, and is driving with her gloved hands. You're
Yeah.
wearing contaminated gloves. You have now contaminated your entire car. If you're going to be going out wearing gloves, the same thing applies. Treat that as washing your hands. If you have dirty gloves, remove them before touching your car keys. Remove them before getting in your car. Don't contaminate things unnecessarily, right?
Yeah.
And it could be that she's completely aware of this and she treats her car as dirty, takes her gloves off before she gets home. I don't know, but it's something I don't think a lot of people think about. Like, if you are wearing all of this protective equipment, you might get lured into a false sense of security.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
that's
like we
something
have, go ahead.
that's something that really worries me, is if people are wearing masks and gloves, they might say, oh, I was wearing all this stuff, I don't need to wash my hands. And especially if you don't know how to properly take off your gloves to not contaminate your hands, that could be an issue as well, right? That
Yeah.
you have these dirty gloves and now you're touching them but thinking you're safe.
Yeah. So we have a ton of nurses at the gym, and my cousin-in-law, like
Hmm.
my wife's cousin, is a nurse at Henry Ford in Jackson, and he shared something the other day that's basically said, like, if you're wearing gloves and you're leaving your house and you have gloves on the whole time, and then you come back with your gloves on, like, you might as well not even wear your gloves,
Right.
because like you're taking, and I'm very much paraphrasing what the post said, but that's essentially the gist of it.
Hmm.
Um, and so, like, I mean, in my opinion, at least, and I'm not a medical professional or a scientist at all, but this is just my perception of it, is like, I'm doing a couple things here. Number one, I am wearing gloves. So
Hmm.
like you said, I have a sense of me being safe, right? Because I've got gloves on.
Yep.
But as soon as I walk outside and touch my door handle, like, I know for me, my door handle, it does not get cleaned.
Yep.
So the inside of my, like, as soon as I get in and out of my car, every time I'm washing my hands, like,
Hmm.
or hand sanitizer or something. Like, if I'm in and out, like, if I'm leaving my car to go somewhere, I'm cleaning myself before I go in, just because I know the inside of my car, I've not, because I'm a delivery driver. Like, it's just, I would rather not try stress about cleaning that every 5 seconds of my life.
Right.
Um, so anyway, as soon as I get in my car, if I wear gloves out into my car, I should probably take those gloves off
Hmm.
and then go into the store with clean gloves on, right? Like,
Right.
in theory, that would make the most sense. And then I start touching stuff, and then I go to pay at the checkout with my dirty gloves. I should take my gloves off again, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So no one's doing that. At least I don't think so. And so for me, like, I see all these people wearing gloves and stuff, and I'm like, okay, I'm not mad at you for doing that. I think
Hmm.
it's cool. Like, I think it's cool, whatever, trendy. It's a hipster
Yeah.
thing to do now. I don't think it's a bad thing, but like you said, I think it does give a false sense of security. I think, people might be a little bit more reckless with what they're doing because they
Hmm.
have gloves on, and not intentionally. I don't think it's um, what's the word? I don't even know what I'm trying to say. It starts with an M, but it's a bad way. You're not
Yeah.
being a bad person, like, on purpose. You're just doing what you think is right, but,
Hmm.
like, you have to be careful about that. So, like, how, like, in your, like, from your perspective, like, your eyes, like, what, like, does that drive you crazy when you see people do that, or are you just like eye rolling, shaking your head, like, what it, like, how do you fix that?
I mean, education is the main way, right? But you can lead a horse to water. Um, this is something that in the lab we're taught from day one. You go in the lab, anytime you work with any sort of chemical, you're wearing gloves. I mean, I don't even touch pipettes without putting on gloves, even though they should be clean. I don't trust them to be, right? So wearing gloves, practicing that good hygiene. But then there's also a requirement when you work in a lab that you wash your hands before you leave the lab, even if you were wearing gloves. It's just you do it. You assume that you contaminated yourself.
Yeah.
Um, and that's something that I think isn't being pushed that should right now to the public is even if you wear gloves, still follow all of the basic
Yeah.
principles that we're being told initially. If you wear gloves, still wash your hands when you get home. Still wash your hands when you leave your home. Wash your hands any chance you can get, really. And it does drive me nuts, but at the same time, it's not the people's fault. I've had this essentially pounded into me over working in labs for how old am I now? I guess 8 years. So
Yeah.
it's something that
It's like washing your hands is normal practice for you,
right. I
but
work
not for
with
everyone.
yeah, I work with influenza viruses. Like I have to practice good hygiene all the time, um, and that's something that not everyone's trained to do. And ordinary people wouldn't think about this stuff either. Why would you, right? Why would you think, oh, I have virus on me, I need to go wash my hands and stuff?
Right. So what do you like? I guess what's the difference between, like, the flu and this? Like, why, so, and from the beginning, like, I was like,
Mhm.
oh, it's going to be like the flu. A bunch of people are going to get it. It's not going to be that bad. Turns out like my initial thought was wrong, which I'm okay with that. Like, I mean, it sucks that it happened, but I'm okay with, being wrong. Um,
Yeah.
Shocker to some, I'm sure. But like, so why is it different? Why do we need to take this more seriously?
Okay. So there's a couple reasons. The best case, or like the best way to compare these wouldn't be compared against seasonal flu. What happens every winter, right? We know the flu's going around. That's mild. The reason relatively mild compared to this virus, still severe, still causes a lot of deaths worldwide. Don't
Yeah,
take me wrong.
right.
Uh,
You're not
hundreds.
downplaying the flu. You're
Yeah,
just
it causes millions, billions of infections each year. In the United States alone, upwards of they usually say like between 12 to 60,000 deaths per year, depending on how bad
wow.
the year is. So to put that into perspective, right now with COVID, we're at just over 7,000 deaths in the United States.
Okay.
Um, but
So we're getting close to that bottom tier, which we would not like. We would like to not hit, but like
right, yeah,
data, like not to be morbid, but like,
right.
like
Um,
people are still throwing house parties, so like we're heading that direction.
yeah, and that said, influenza infects far more people um, than COVID seems to. Um, at least in a given year, it's more widespread, and that's because we're not taking these measures to shut it down. The COVID or the virus that causes COVID actually is very infectious, very contagious. So I'm not saying that flu is more contagious than it by any means. We just see more infections because we're not as careful, and you have a lot more mild infections with the flu as well that we know of right
Yeah.
now. That could
Would you just say
change.
it's a little bit different also because we have like a flu vaccine and we have flu shots and we have all these different things put into place to kind of mitigate it. Granted, it still causes a
Hmm.
big problem, but like it's relatively under control.
Yeah. Yeah. So with the flu, yeah, we do have the vaccines. We do have anti-flu drugs. Um, Granted, they have to be administered pretty early to work well. But also with the flu, the infections are more spread out. You don't have 10, like, you don't have all
Every
of these people. I
Yeah,
won't say tens, but you don't have all of these people coming to the same hospital with the same disease at once, needing to
yeah,
be put on ventilators, right?
right.
Uh, that's one of the biggest problems with the coronavirus is that we're just having this influx of people that need critical care. Um, but I would say let's compare this to a pandemic influenza. Um, so, or actually, let's keep it with seasonal. Show why that matters more. So, with seasonal, the way the seasonal influenza viruses come out is usually there's a pandemic. So, like the last pandemic we had for the flu was in 2009. The swine flu outbreak is what
Yep.
they referred to it as. So, when that happened, the swine flu then became a seasonal strain. So every year when you have influenza, typically we think of there being 3 strains circulating. So one is the H1N1 or the swine flu, and that's really just a variant of the virus that came out in 2009. The reason it's not severe like it was in 2009 is because we've acquired immunity to it. So at the time, it was a terrible virus. It was killing a lot of people. That one was actually interesting in that instead of targeting mostly the elderly, it actually affected healthy adults more, which is very unusual. But now we get this same virus every year, and it's not nearly as bad. And that's because we've been
Yeah.
able to acquire immunity to it. It hit us hard the first year, and now we're okay. As opposed to the coronavirus, this is a virus we have not had circulating in humans. We don't have the acquired immunity to it. And we really, for the majority of people, haven't had exposure to a similar virus either. Um, One reason the elderly were somewhat protected from the swine flu is it's thought that they had somewhat protective immunity from a strain of virus that circulated decades ago. So that the swine flu was
Okay.
close enough to other H1N1 strains that used to be
Oh,
in circulation that
that's
they thought,
interesting.
yeah,
That's really interesting.
yeah. So they're like, okay, people that were old enough to have had the H1N1,
In
back
the
in,
60s or whatever.
yeah, whenever it was, right? They thought, okay, they have some sort of cross protection against this virus. Where young people who have never seen an H1N1 were just getting hit with a sledgehammer. Now, the coronavirus, pretty much no one in the world has had exposure to that, with the exception of people who had the SARS outbreak or got exposed to SARS or MERS when those pandemics or epidemics happened. But granted, I mean, that's only a few thousand people. It's
Yeah.
8,000 for SARS. I think even fewer for MERS. Um, and those viruses are somewhat pretty substantially different from the current coronavirus as well. So SARS and then the current virus, they're about, I think I saw the number was 75% similar or so.
Okay.
And then the new virus and MERS were about 50% similar. So really, that's pretty different. And
Yeah.
so we essentially, as a planet, don't have immunity to this new virus whatsoever. There
Yeah.
wasn't anyone alive decades ago that saw something similar. This is brand new. So we're all getting hit by something that we've not been trained to deal with. And that's
Yeah.
one reason that it's so severe.
Well, and I think it's interesting, like from a non-scientific standpoint, for me, like seeing like, okay, this we've only had like 4 or 5 months since like we even the first case,
Right.
and like people, I mean, you see on Facebook all the time, like, I can't believe we don't have a vaccine. We have all this money to dump into the economy, but we can't figure out a vaccine. But it's like, guys, like I'm not a scientist, but I don't think that you can test things that fast from a science standpoint. Like, and I might be dead wrong. And if that's the case, tell me to shut up. But it's like, there is probably a process that I don't know because I did not pay attention in chemistry. And like, there's, so there's this process in place, I'm sure. And like, you have to test things correctly, because
Right.
if you test something wrong and you put it out there, like that could
Mhm.
probably be worse than what we're currently facing,
Oh,
potentially.
oh,
Not
absolutely.
trying to cause
Oh,
like not striking fear into you, just like
right.
my thoughts. um I mean, so can you talk a little bit about that, like, why from and I'm saying myself, an
Mhm.
uneducated scientific person, why does it take quote unquote so long? I did the
Mhm.
finger quotes there for the people not watching the video. Why does it take so long for a vaccine or something like that to come out?
Okay. Yeah. So the first thing is obviously identifying your virus. We've done that. Then what you need to do is figure out what parts of this virus are going to be immunogenic or essentially cause an immune response, which is what you want for a vaccine. Um,
Can you explain what that means real fit? What's the immunogenic? What's the immune response? What are you looking for?
okay, so typically what we're aiming for with viruses right now, the best protection we can get is called sterile immunity, where you're not going to show symptoms and you're not going to spread the virus if you get infected with
Okay.
it. That's what vaccines are looking to do, and that's primarily done by generating antibodies. So if you get a vaccine, it's essentially putting in either a deactivated virus or different proteins from the virus to teach different cells in your immune system what this virus looks like. And then from that, they'll start making antibodies that essentially, um, I've got a little analogy for it. Let's say you have Taco Bell, right?
I
Let's say,
love Taco Bell.
yeah,
Perfect. Let's go.
okay. We'll use Taco Bell
I'm
as
in.
an analogy for this virus. It's perfect. So, yeah, I love Taco Bell too. Taco Bell, don't hate me for this. Um, so let's treat Taco Bell as the lungs of an infected person.
Okay.
Or actually, just the lungs of a person, not even infected, right? Ordinarily, you've got your coworker, or you've got your employees there, and whoever is lingering, eating in the restaurant and whatnot. And your employees are making quesadillas, my favorite, or Doritos Locos
Five
Tacos.
five layer
Uh,
cheesy gordita crunch. Like, that's
yeah,
a good
there you
one.
go, right? So they're doing all this stuff. Let's say that's normal lung function, getting oxygen into the blood, getting rid of carbon dioxide, what have you, right? Now, all of a sudden, though, one employee says, I'm going to make this amazing Taco Bell burger. It's never been done. And, the manager theoretically should come in and be like, you're not allowed to make burgers as a Taco Bell. Well, let's say the burger is this virus. And now it's in this guy's mind that he wants to make it. And so the manager is essentially, in this analogy, your innate immune system. So there are cells that live in your lungs that are essentially supposed to deal with viruses as they come in and prevent them from growing.
Okay.
Well, this virus is
It's
smart.
like the home defense system.
Right. So this virus comes in and is like, hey, manager, here's some AirPods and here's a little iPad or whatever. Tiger King just came out on Netflix. Go watch the entire season, but take all week, right?
Right.
So the manager's over here watching this show. Meanwhile, the guy over here is making Taco Bell burgers. And he's like, man, this is the best burger I've ever had. I'm going to make thousands of these every day. And he looks at the guy next to him working. He's like, hey, Frankie, try this burger I made. Frankie comes over, tries the burger. He's like, that's the best burger ever. I'm going to make 1,000 of these, right? And so this is how the virus spreads into lungs is it shuts down a part of your immune system and is now spreading throughout the cells that live in your lungs and just growing exponentially. So you're having tons of viruses produced. And now essentially what you're waiting for then is a different part of your immune system, the adaptive part. And so this is what is specific to any pathogen you get. So if you have the flu, you have your T cells and B cells in your adaptive immune system, and they're like, okay, I'm looking for the flu and that's it. As opposed to the manager who's like, anything that doesn't fit, I'm shutting down.
Yeah.
And he's going to do it the same way no matter what. He's going to say, don't make that. Don't make that. Doesn't matter what it is. These guys are going to be like, don't make this exact burger. And so the way I like to think of this is like, let's say you and I were into fitness, right? We'll be the T cells. So
Okay.
ordinarily, like in the case of a flu infection, we would start showing up to Taco Bell at day 7 because one of our friends came over and was like, hey, I found this burger at Taco Bell. I'm not going to give you the whole burger. I'm going to give you just the patty. Take a look at this patty. What do you think of this? And we're like, that seems interesting. We're going to go check it out. And then we walk into Taco Bell, see these guys making burgers, and we're like, this is Taco Bell. You can't make burgers. And so we start throwing medicine balls at them. Anyone making a burger, we throw medicine balls at them, take them out. Those people aren't making burgers, right?
Like, you can't make my 5-layer gordita crunch if you're making burgers. Stop.
Exactly. So we go in, we're throwing medicine balls at anyone making a burger, right? So eventually we get to the point that we've taken out everyone making a burger. Now you have the problem, though, that there's still a stockpile of tens of thousands, if not
You've got all
millions.
these burgers.
There's burgers everywhere, right? They're flowing out the drive-through window. Anyone could just be taking them wherever, right? So you got the Wendy's police, and these guys don't like seeing novel burgers. So they come in like, these Taco Bell burgers aren't okay. We're going to put them in black plastic bags so no one can ever see them. And then all of a sudden the manager is like, oh, hey, black plastic bags, we got to get those out of the restaurant. Boom, 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 right? So the Wendy's police, they're like your B cells. They come in and essentially bag up the virus.
Okay.
And this is what you're trying to do with a vaccine. You're trying to train your Wendy's police to come in and make sure that these burgers don't get released anywhere else. And essentially, when that happens, your managers will come in and start clearing that out. So the point of a vaccine then is to make this happen with the very first burger. As soon as someone's like, I'm going to make a burger, the Wendy's police are like, no, 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 I've seen this before. You're not making this. Boom. Right?
they get the employee out of the building.
Exactly. Yeah. So essentially what you want with a vaccine is say, okay, I'm going to take this burger patty and I'm going to take it down the road right now before the burger has ever entered this Taco Bell. I'm just going to take a burger patty down to Wendy's, show the police this there, and they're like, okay, I'm going to be watching out for this in the future. And they'll be patrolling they'll be patrolling Holt and say, okay, this Taco Bell, wait, they're using the patty that I've seen before. We got to stop this now. And so essentially the virus can't ever get produced. That's the point of a vaccine is generate this, right? So now the problem for the real world, when we take this out of the analogy, is we have to figure out what parts of the virus look like the patty. What's going to cause these guys to come in and shut this down? And so that's something that a lot of scientists have been working on. So they're doing things like crystallography. So basically, this is something where you rapidly freeze the virus and then you put it into an X-ray microscope type of deal, and you could actually see the structure and whatnot. So they're doing this and trying to say, okay, what parts of this look like something that we know B cells attack for other viruses? And then a lot of computer modeling is being done, so they can actually like take this virus and see how it interacts with the lung cells and see like what's sticking out that's the right size such that it might work out for a vaccine. And then um, you essentially have companies who now need to take what's published, which, I mean, doing these experiments is not exactly fast. It's happening at an unprecedented rate right now just because any
Yeah.
information is vital. Um, but you have people that need to run these simulations or do these experiments, get it out, make sure it's reliable first, right? You can't just do something once and say, okay, here you go. You have to
Yeah.
validate it.
We figured
Um,
out all your answers.
yeah. And then you have to come up with a way to turn that into a vaccine. You have the information. How do you use it? And the first vaccine I'm aware of that entered clinical trials was one that's essentially saying, okay, we know that these parts of the virus should cause an immune response. Obviously, with this virus, we're not just going to like go infect people with it and do that, right? And we
Yeah,
don't
not
yet
ideal.
have, yeah, bad idea. And like with the flu, one of the things people like to use for vaccines is a live attenuated virus. So this is essentially the virus, but without the parts of it that make it dangerous. So it's not going to like cause death in your lungs and whatnot if it gets there, but it has all of the parts necessary that it could be gobbled up and the B cells are trained to see it. That takes work though to generate a live attenuated virus and ensure its safety. So when you do that, I mean, you have to go through all of your typical preclinical safety testing showing in animals that this is safe, it doesn't kill the animals. And then you have to show in animals that it works, it's able to cause an immune response, and then you would show that it's protective as well. Then you get to take this into people and do your clinical trials. And so in clinical trials, you have phase 1. This is just safety in a small group of healthy people. So,
Okay.
they would take you and me, people that shouldn't have the virus or any other health condition, give us the vaccine, and then monitor us to make sure it's safe. Um, then they would take it into phase 2, which is
How long
making
does that usually take, phase 1?
uh,
Probably different. I'm sure it's different for everything, but
it is different depending on your primary concern. Right now, it's moving for this virus at the scale of a couple months or so. Um,
okay.
they're kind of relaxing some guidelines because we need to get stuff out. They're not skipping it. There's, we're still like, we have to make sure this is safe,
Yeah.
but
It might be
they're
something like instead of 10 weeks, it's 8 or something
right.
like that. Yeah, just
Exactly.
like, oh,
So making sure that we're moving, and part of this too is the shift of resources to make sure that we're doing this as fast as possible. Um,
okay.
but yeah, so that takes, a couple months. Then you move into phase 2. It's essentially the same thing, but making sure it's safe in these patients or, sick people. Um, with this, I don't know exactly how that works. Typically that's with a medicine. So like if you're treating a cancer patient, you would make sure it's safe in a cancer patient, right? In the context of this, I don't exactly know how it works considering you wouldn't give a vaccine to a sick person anyway. But then you move into phase 3, and this is the efficacy. So seeing if this vaccine actually prevents infection. There's a lot of talk right now over the best way to do this because you don't want to give someone a vaccine that's unproven, infect them with the virus, and then it turns out the vaccine doesn't work, and now this person is infected and hospitalized,
Right.
right?
Right.
So there's some controversy right now over the best way to do this. One is, just taking blood from people after vaccinating them and looking to see if the antibodies are there and like testing the antibodies outside of the body. So if you put the antibodies and the virus together in a plate or a petri dish, what happens? So
Yeah.
that's one way that they could start testing this and get an idea of if it works or not before actually testing people, right?
Right.
But the other side of this too, that's just the basic science side of being able to go from the virus to a working product to
Yeah.
showing, figuring out if it works. The other side is manufacturing. So typically when you start these things, you're doing it on a pretty small scale. So, you would start with animal studies and, for that, you don't need that much material. But now if you end up having a vaccine that works, right now we've got how many people in the world that need to be potentially protected with this.
Yeah.
And if only one company has a successful vaccine, that one company now needs to provide their vaccine for the entire world. So to scale up production, really takes a lot of work. A lot of times you have to get new facilities or repurpose your facilities and come up with ways. A lot of times these things aren't easily produced on a large scale. So you have to have, actually, they're like engineers whose jobs are to figure out how to take what you've done at a small scale and make it large scale. And it's really a
Yeah.
lot of work. With the flu vaccine, the way that they did this was using chicken eggs. And they said, okay, if we take a ton of chicken eggs and infect them with our vaccine strains, they'll grow exponentially in those chicken eggs. Granted, you only get 2 days of growth in the chicken eggs typically, and then you take it out. But even that, you have to have a ton of eggs, right? And
Yeah.
that creates its own challenges where whatever you have in the eggs can mutate, and so when it comes out, it's different. Um, so right now, the vaccine that is furthest along in clinical trials is one where they're not using the whole virus or an inactivated virus. What they're doing is essentially putting in the genetic material for parts of the virus. And so essentially the viral proteins or parts of the viral proteins get synthesized in your body and theoretically will teach your immune response or your immune system what those parts of the protein looks like. And they're hoping that by doing that, that's the part of the virus that we needed to be looking for anyway. So they're in phase 1 right now, and
Yeah.
the results are promising. It looks safe, which, I mean, with that method, it doesn't surprise me at all. Whether or not it works, I'm interested to
Yeah.
see.
Well, and I think what you were talking about, like the production of it, is something that's in my opinion overlooked. Just because, like let's talk about like the ventilators, for instance. Like
Yeah.
we need ventilators. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
not a question. Like we absolutely need them. But um, like I've seen people like, why isn't XYZ company shutting down and making these ventilators? Like, well, like they don't typically make ventilators. Like
Right.
it's not like they can just like, all right guys, today we're making ventilators. Like I'm sure I mean, I again don't know this for sure, but I would be willing to bet a lot of money that there is a particular process to make a medical ventilator to save somebody in a situation like coronavirus or whatever else they might need it for. And so, like, GM, for instance, can't just
Mhm.
shut down today and then open up tomorrow making ventilators. Like, I'm sure they need new systems, new parts, probably material. Like, and so I would assume from a like chemical standpoint, it would be similar for somewhere making a vaccine. Like, like my father, or not, is he is my stepdad. I was gonna say my father-in-law. My stepdad, um, he works for Bayer, like the
Mhm.
pharmaceutical company, and so for him, like they couldn't just shut down Bayer and then start producing something that they don't normally make. Am I wrong with that, or am I on the right track?
It really depends on the company. A lot of companies now, some of them fortunately already had drugs for other viruses. And so, like, there was a drug that was used for the Ebola outbreak in Africa. And now that, uh, so for that drug, the clinical trials had already been done for Ebola. And so they're able to say, okay, I'm going to come in with this drug. Let's see if it works for COVID. But in this case, they don't have to do the safety test because that's already been done. So now they're just able to launch into the clinical trial to look and see if it works. So we're lucky that there are some companies that already have infrastructure and drugs available that might work for this. As far as
Yeah,
vaccines go, we are primarily relying on companies that specialize in vaccines. And a lot of them fortunately have really good platforms. So that, we've made this type of vaccine that works for this virus or this bacteria or whatnot. And they're trying to adapt based off of the information we have for this virus. So they're like saying, okay, we had this really successful platform. Let's see if it works for this virus. And so the infrastructure was there. We've got a really good pharmaceutical and biotech industry in the United States, fortunately, but Europe does as well. So we're very fortunate to have that moving along, and they were ready, as ready as you could be. Of
yeah,
course, you have people that have never worked on a coronavirus in their life all of a sudden being like, okay, I have to learn a new virus, possibly a new organ system if these people didn't study the lungs. Um,
yeah,
and so there's shifts there. I think, though, the people that work at these companies are brilliant, and they're essentially chosen because they're able to do this type of work. In the pharmaceutical company, you could be working on, neuroscience is a great example of this. And a lot of companies had neuroscience programs, and in the last couple of years, we're not doing neuroscience anymore. Basically, none of the drugs are working. They're wasting money, and we basically just don't know enough about these neurological conditions to come up with good drugs to target them. So, within a matter of days, the company says, okay, we're completely out of this field. If you want to still work for us, you have to transfer to something else we're interested in. And the people are able to do this. The scientists out there are just brilliant that they're able to come in and relearn or learn new things as needed.
That's crazy. So they like if you worked at a place that made vaccines, like you would one day be working on this thing, and then the next day nothing that you've done is relevant, and you're on something completely different.
It's entirely possible,
That's crazy.
Yeah, if you're working on oh God, let's say a vaccine to Zika virus. I don't know. It doesn't matter what you're picking, right? You're working on vaccine and you go into clinical trials, and, everything that this company has done uses one model. This is not realistic at all. But as an example, if, you entirely use one model for vaccines and you finally get to clinical trials and it turns out it's not safe in people, that company's like, okay, we're done with this. We are changing gears entirely as a company. Everyone that works there is now like, okay, we'll learn something new.
Wow.
It's crazy. You have to be able to adapt very quickly, or you're not going to prosper.
That's crazy. So we're getting close to an hour, so I'm gonna kind of start wrapping it up a little bit. So Rob, I want to ask you, like, with everything going on, like there's a lot of negativity, and like I don't want to say negativity. There's a lot of doom and gloom right now. Like, let's just be honest. So like, how are you personally, like, you're working on this and around this thing so much right now? Like, how are you able to separate yourself from the reality? Like, we're not taking it light, like you're not taking it lightly when you come home, but how are you able to come home and have a beer, have dinner, and not like go crazy over this?
I mean, one thing is I'm keeping busy, and I love science. I love learning, and this has given a very good opportunity to be learning new things every day. I mean, every time I go do a literature search, there's a new paper, and every day you're getting dozens of them, if not more. Since this started, there have been, as of like 2 weeks ago, over 900 papers that have come out about this virus.
Wow.
It's insane. So
obviously more now because it was 2 weeks ago.
Exactly. Yeah. So a part of this is I am keeping myself busy. I'm learning. My boss and I are working on developing experiments for this virus. So I'm chasing after the immune system. We know very little about how the immune system responds to this virus and what this virus does to the immune system. There's some cool stuff out there for this virus in particular. So to come back to the Taco Bell analogy, these burgers are killing the redemption fitness people of the world. So those are your T cells in the immune system. For some reason in these patients, there are, just comparing the people with moderate disease to severe disease, people with severe disease have a reduced number of T cells, which are very important. And so no one knows why, and no one knows the importance of these cells in responding to this virus. And so, I'm every day talking with my boss, like, okay, these are experiments that I think we need to do. These are going to be very important to the field and could give us potential therapeutic options if we find something that's like, if we fix this one thing in T cells, now the virus doesn't kill them and the people with more T cells are protected, right? So, there's a lot of hope from where I'm coming from, in that we have things that we could chase after and ways that we could try to contribute to this and whatnot. And then apart from the science, to keep saying, I'm home, I get my dogs, thankfully, we've started having some sunshine. Get outside, stay away from people. Yeah, seriously.
It's not snowing anymore.
But I've been, escaping from reality every night, playing video games, reading fiction, watching movies and stuff. It's like, it's severe out there, but at the same time, you still got to make sure that you're living a life, and don't give in to just what is outside. I personally stay away from the media. Um, I find their reporting to be inflammatory a lot of times, even if it's factual, the way that they sell it, with headlines
Yeah.
and stuff. There was one example. So the WHO on their website has like myths about the virus thing. And uh, maybe a month ago, I don't know, it's changed so rapidly and it's hard to keep track of time now. But
Yeah.
a little while back, they had like a section on there. And the myth was that this disease spreads through your pets. And they had on their
Right.
website,
I
this
saw that.
doesn't, yeah, they had it on there. It does not spread through your pets. Well, then they took it off like a week later because someone in Hong Kong reported that they found the virus on their dog or whatever, right? And they took it off. And the news outlets here said, oh, the WHO and CDC are saying that this spreads through animals. I'm like, no, they just took it off their myth section because there's uncertainty. They're not saying this happens. Like,
Right. They're just
and
saying it happened once and we don't want to say it doesn't.
right. Yeah. And so like the articles, the headlines had this inflammatory statement. If you actually read the articles, they're factually saying like, oh, this was on there, this is taken off. And so the headline doesn't match at all. And I see that a lot nowadays, that headlines aren't matching the actual facts. But if you
Yeah.
read the article, typically the facts are there. So I've been avoiding the media. It really angers me that they're using these inflammatory things, and a lot of places now are making it political. I'm like, let's not be political. This is a global pandemic. American
Right.
politics should not be a factor in
That
this. Like,
that is the single thing that pisses me off the most about this whole virus thing.
yeah,
Is like you can directly control what you say about it, and like if you're like you said earlier, whatever you think about Trump one way or another, like
hmm
whether he's the best, most qualified person ever, like the bottom line is like he's in the position that's leading us right
yeah,
now, and like we should probably not just talk shit about him all the time. Like
right,
when it's all said and done, we can all look back and say, hey, this dude's an idiot or this dude's a fool if that's what you
right,
think. But like right now, let's all just come together as a human
yeah.
race and like work together for this thing.
Right.
But
Yeah. It's driving me nuts in the media. You're seeing all these things like CNN. I get in my newsfeed all the time, and yeah, every website has their bias, and that's fine, whatever. But when it comes to this, like, let's stop being critical of everything.
right,
Let's encourage growth. If the president makes a mistake, let's say, here's how we could learn from this. Not say he's a fool, we need to get him out of power, whatever. Right. Like,
right,
time and place, not now.
right, right. For sure, man. And so with you like making sure you're like separating yourself like from this thing like
Mhm.
mentally, not physically also, but
Yeah.
but specifically mentally. Um, what would you say to somebody who might be a little overly anxious right now about this? Like, how would you like? Hey, it's gonna be all right. Just do your good deeds, whatever. Like, what would you say to somebody like that?
uh, the world has recovered from worse. This is nowhere near the worst pandemic that has hit the world. Um, and, especially considering where we are with modern medicine, we're going to pull through. There certainly will be repercussions, both economically, mentally, and whatnot, but try to focus on the light at the end of the tunnel. While we're here, it sucks, but make the best of it. Working from home, assuming you were fortunate and get to work from home, right? Find a way to be productive and do something um, that you ordinarily couldn't. Take the breaks you need. So, I'm an advocate right now. I'm working from home. Fortunately, I'm more productive working from home. A lot of times at work, my coworkers
Yeah.
and I can be a little chatty. And the way our lab is set up, it's weird where like all of our desks are in the middle and people do experiments like around, and we don't have cubicles or anything. So even if you're trying to focus, we've got 6 or 7 people there. Someone's bound to talk, and it makes it
Right.
tough. So if you can be more productive at home, which is my case, absolutely do, and acknowledge that too. If you're able to get more work done at home, that means you also have more time to prioritize your well-being. So in my
Right.
case, I've been sleeping in until 10 a.m. every day because I
Yeah.
know I could start
Same,
at 10
dude.
a.m.
Same.
Right.
Same.
Like, I know I can start at 10 a.m. and achieve more now than if I were to go into the lab at 8 o'clock and leave at
Yeah.
6 o'clock during normal
Right,
times.
dude. Like I was just actually just telling the coaches before this, we had a staff call, and I was like, I get up at 10
Hmm.
and 9, sometimes 10, go for a walk. I work for 4 hours and I'm
Yeah.
pretty much done. Like,
Yeah.
because if I don't, like, I will get so trapped inside of this thing that I'm recording this podcast on, and
Right.
my computer, and I will stay up here in my podcast recording studio slash mom's bedroom
Hmm.
slash office for the whole day.
Yeah.
And so I blocked scheduled for myself, and it's allowed me to be have way more free time.
Right.
You know, call that what you will, I guess, but free time to like help around the house and like with the kids and stuff. And so, dude, it's been nice. Like,
Yeah.
let's look at the positive side of this whole thing. Like, spending way more time with my kids and wife than
Hmm.
I ever have since we've had kids. And you're at home too, so I'm sure you and Jennifer
Yeah.
are probably hanging out a little bit more. And um, so yeah, dude, I appreciate you coming on, because there's a lot of people out there that think they know everything, and I know there's quite a few people that listen to this that are kind of all over the place with this coronavirus thing. And I
Hmm.
hope that what you shared about, like, especially the Taco Bell analogy, not just because it's Taco Bell, but because it made it make sense,
Hmm.
and it brought it down to a level that, like, I could understand. So like a first grader could probably understand this, because I could. So but seriously, man, I really appreciate it. Is there like a place people can find you, or are you just like this incognito person right now? Or like, if somebody wants to reach out and say thanks or whatever, like, how can they do that?
Yeah, I could give you I guess an email address would be fine, that
Yeah.
I could be contacted at, and
Cool.
you could put
I'll
that
put it in the
in.
show notes. So if
Yeah.
guys, if you have any questions or anything, I guess I'll just tell them to send it to you. And if you don't want to or can't answer it, just tell them. But if you guys have anything at all, you feel free to message or email Robert. His address will be posted in the show notes to this. Um, Maybe you'll get 0 emails. Maybe you'll get 100. I have no idea. So
Yeah.
hopefully we don't flood your inbox too much.
Yeah, no worries. I have a separate email for that, so it's good.
Perfect. Give me your spam. Give me your spam folder.
Yeah, and I do check it, so.
Cool. Cool, Robert. Well, hey, man, I really appreciate you jumping on. Hopefully you have an awesome weekend, and just keep, doing what you're doing, dude. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks. Happy to be here.
See you, buddy.
See ya.